Spring football is just a week away, and you know what that means. It's time to talk about another battle of backup quarterbacks this year. Will it be Zach Wilson or Brandon Rose who emerges as Cam Rising's backup? We're discussing on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments, as well as on social media, where you can follow our show at Locked On Utes. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by FanDuel. You can make every moment more. New customers can join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. My name is JT Wistersill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's show by the head of Fan Nation All Utes, Kevin Borba. And Kevin, when talking about spring ball, it's always about the battle of the backup quarterbacks. Whether we go back to 2 years ago, because look, for a lot of teams out there, they'll talk about who's going to be the starter. We know that it's Cam Rising. But for the past few years, we've been doing Bryson Barnes versus. It was Bryson Barnes versus DeQuindon Jackson. It was Bryson Barnes versus last year, Nate Johnson. And Bryson Barnes, in both of those instances, 2022 helped Utah beat Washington State. That was a huge game that Utah absolutely needed everything from as it pertained to them making and repeating its Pac-12 championships. Then you go to last year. Bryson Barnes, I know he got a lot of crap, but he still helped this team get bowl eligible, had a number of really strong performances. Backup quarterback is extremely important, and it's going to be a fascinating battle to watch and see. Brandon Rose, who's been buying his time, waiting, got the injury, so wasn't able to get a fair shake in the end of battling for the QB2 job. I've said before, I think Bryson Barnes was still going to win that job, even though Brandon won it in the spring last year. Bryson was playing better based on the reports we saw, but Brandon's been waiting. He nearly was it last year. This is his opportunity. But here comes Isaac Wilson, and everyone is all enamored and fired up about this guy's potential. How could he not be after what he did at Corner Canyon? So just a fascinating of a tale of a guy who's been buying his time, and the guy who just won the state championship, flying high, already been heralded as the next great Utah quarterback by many people. I think he's got a chance to be exactly that. I feel like all eyes are going to be on this battle come spring.
Yeah, I totally agree. Realistically, when I look at Brandon Rose and Isaac Wilson, it's like, how far ahead is Brandon Rose? Just because we had that whole thing last year where he was going to start and then he got injured. And it's like, okay, he got injured, whatever. Gets to the bowl game and it's like, okay, we're starting Bryson Barnes, who's transferring, which is fine. And Bryson Barnes is obviously playing horrendously, which obviously we talked about at that time, probably a lot to deal with when you're transferring and focusing on a bowl game at the same time. But they were reluctant to play Brandon Rose. They literally did not want to play him. And like, I think the only highlight we got from him was him playing catch on the sidelines. And it's like, he can't be that too far ahead of Isaac Wilson in terms of where they're at on the field. Now, I think his knowledge of the playbook is probably further along than Isaac's, but I'm really interested to see how quickly Isaac could pick up the playbook, because if he could pick it up quickly and not make some of those mistakes that we saw in the Polynesian Bowl, where he was just hucking it all over the field, ill-advised, maybe he could push for the quarterback 2 spot. Realistically, I would give Brandon Rose the edge because he's more experienced. So I always give the edge to experience, because if it's close, you give it to the young guy, or if it's not close, you give it to the more experienced guy. But if it is close, then you got to go with the young guy. So I would say Brandon Rose has the edge right now.
I agree. We're going to be going throughout this episode and talk about some of the other backup battles, or just others, even not even backup, this other starting battles that are going to be very interesting, just the positional battles that'll play out over the course of fall camp. But to me, this is such a fascinating one because it is the quarterback position. It has the potential, unlike any other position in the game, to swing a single game's outcome is the quarterback play. So when talking about these guys, first, if you're talking about Wilson, I mean, he's the new guy coming in, so there's going to be a lot of attention, highlights, and said he won a state championship. He was the 2024 Mr. Football for the state from Deseret News. Also got a ton of awards from KSL Sports Rewind up there too. Talk about a guy who just this last year threw for over 4,595 yards. He had 49 touchdowns to just 9 interceptions. And that's not even mentioning, I mean, overall in his career, he threw threw for 8,773 yards. He can absolutely light it up, led this offense up and down the field at Corner Canyon numerous times. In the last game he played, he won a state championship in Rice-Eccles Stadium. But then we look to Brandon Rose, right? This is a guy who was a 3-star coming out of high school, 7,520 yards for him, 74 touchdowns, threw for over 3,000 yards too, and 33 touchdowns as a senior. Also had a couple of over 230 rushing yards in there too. So he was still accomplished in high school and has already done some things, made some waves. Once again, won the spring ball battle a year ago, looked pretty good in the spring game as well too. So both these guys feel like they definitely got a shot at it, whether we mentioned it's Wilson's potential or Brandon Rose's experience. Both these guys come with solid resumes. And I think the thing that's always great about Utah, Kevin, is you're going to get to go out there and both guys are going to have a shot to win it. No one is handed this job.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the best parts about Utah is like, it's literally, if you're the best man, you will win the job. We've seen it time and time again. Jake Bentley at the time was the best man and won the job over Cam Rising. And Cam Rising is probably going to walk away from Utah as a program legend, or at least legend adjacent, if you will. So yeah, I think realistically, it just comes down to who can make less mistakes and who can protect the ball. That is usually what coaches will tell you every time I interview a coach, and I'm like, okay, coach, there's this quarterback battle that everyone's looking forward to. Like I did it with Stanford, for instance. They had 3 new quarterbacks, and it's like, okay, who's going to be the starting quarterback? And at the time, Troy Taylor was like, whoever could protect the ball. That is literally the most important thing. And I imagine Kyle Whittingham, Andy Ludwig, they're the same way. Like whoever is not throwing the ball to the other team is probably going to be in good eyes. Obviously, I think having the ability to make plays with your legs, which Wilson, I think, has the advantage over Rose, that helps too. But it all comes down to, can we trust you to like not kill us with a mistake? Can we trust you to have access to the whole playbook? Because I know a lot of times when the backup quarterback comes in, it's like, okay, we have a 150-page playbook and now it's 50 pages. So who has the best grasp, and who can protect the football? And I think that will be the deciding factor this offseason, this spring.
Yeah, it definitely will be. And for all the reasons you highlighted, I think that's why at the end of spring ball, if we're doing a prediction too, I think it will be Brandon Rose, because it's not about who's the best at making off-platform throws, who's the best at when everything breaks down and it's going absolutely crazy, what can you make out of it? No. What's most important, as you highlighted, ball security. Kyle Whittingham always wants his offense to be run first. Even with as good as Cam Rising, I expect the year he have. Utah will always, their priority is going to be run the ball, and they want to play strong defense and not turn the ball over. We literally saw last year, Nate Johnson's strength, while he improved as a thrower from year 1 to year 2, was running the ball. Utah did not want to let him do that against Oregon State, and Utah lost that game. But it was still within range. I think Kyle Whittingham would defend himself and say, because we weren't turning the ball over and fumbling, which Nate had done a couple times in the previous games when he ran the ball. So I agree. I think Wilson, just that adjustment, right? And also at high school, every time he took the field, he pretty much had the best offensive line and he had the best receivers. And that's the difference at Utah, right? Is even in spring ball, you're going to be playing with good receivers, good offensive line against really good defenders too. So both sides best on best in that scenario, where I'm curious to see how he does with that. Can he cut down on the turnovers and things of that nature? And there's always just a growing period when you make that jump from high school to college. It's very hard to start as a freshman quarterback. I mean, many in general, honestly, over the last few years. I know Caleb Williams made it look easy not that long ago, but there's a reason he's the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft going to be very soon. Like, it's very hard to be able to do that. So for what we highlighted on the turnovers, I think Rose will do a better job at taking care of the ball. I think that was the thing that kind of cost him the job before. It started to cost him. He didn't straight up lose it, but he had started to lose some of the momentum based on the reports when he had sustained that injury. I think he knows that. He knows the system, to your point too, about being in it longer, Kevin. And it's why I do feel that if we had to say, okay, who's going to win the job by the end of spring, I would say Brandon Rose.
I'd agree. And I also wanted to swing back to the point you made about Caleb Williams, because it's one of those things where I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed when the depth chart comes out week 1, because obviously they're not going to release a depth chart until they have to. And Isaac Wilson's not going to be on it, probably, most likely, unless barring injury, God forbid. But he's probably not going to be on the depth chart, and that's okay. That's not an indictment on him. You look at Arch Manning at Texas this past year, was QB3 the whole year. He had 5 passing attempts. You look at Caleb Williams, like you mentioned, Spencer Rattler was a starter until the wheels were basically falling off. Like, they were like, okay, Spencer, you're just not doing what we need you to do. Like, they even wanted to turn back to Caleb Williams. Like, they made it a thing where like they did not want to go to him. Trevor Lawrence, same thing. I forgot who his name was. Oh my gosh. Kelly Bryant, excuse me.
Oh yeah.
Kelly Bryant started over Trevor Lawrence, and Trevor Lawrence was like the best quarterback recruit since Andrew Luck or whatever. So it's like, don't be upset with Isaac Wilson if he's not ready to be a starter right away, because it's rare. Tua Tagovailoa, didn't play any meaningful snaps until it was a championship game. Jalen Hurts was the guy, and they threw a freshman in there. So it's more common for a freshman to not win the job and kind of work his way up the depth chart as the season goes on. That's just one of the disclaimers I want to put out there, because I know everyone's excited about him. Why wouldn't they be? But high school football dominating the Utah high school football circuit is a lot different than going up against one of the better defenses in the country.
You're absolutely right. And, you mentioned Arch Manning. That's a guy we know is doing a great job cutting out all distractions surrounding him. Any that are in his way, he's going to make sure he's only focused on ball too. No video games or anything of that sort getting in the way. I have no idea what I'm talking about. No idea. But anyways, want to talk with you guys about some of the other positional battles going on at the University of Utah come spring ball in a moment. But first, want to talk to you about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes in eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Also want to talk to all of you about another sponsor of episode Locked On Utes in UCCU. Here's some exciting news. UCCU has just elevated their checking accounts by enhancing them with more benefits, more savings, and more online protections than ever before. A lot more. Paired with the most advanced and comprehensive mobile banking tools, Elevated Checking is a must-have financial product packed with lifestyle, security, and financial benefits. The lifestyle benefits alone include cell phone protection, roadside assistance, telehealth with 24/7 access to licensed health professionals with zero copay and exclusive savings on travel, shopping, and dining. And Elevated Checking is free when you do any one of the following. Use your debit or credit card 15 times or more a month, or make a monthly direct deposit of $500 or more. Maintain an average daily balance of $1,500. Otherwise, UCCU Elevated Checking is only $6 a month. You can visit uccu.com to open an Elevated Checking account anyline, or stop by any branch to open an account. UCCU, love where you bank. Kevin, we just got done talking about the backup quarterback, which could very well, and especially with Cam's injury history, may play a role in Utah. But assuming Cam stays healthy, I'm curious for you, what spring ball battle do you think is the most important for Utah as it pertains to their success in 2024?
Oh, that's a great question. Honestly,
Thank you.
I look at the receivers just because it's like they brought in, or they lost a bit. They brought in some interesting guys. And I'm excited to see the receivers. I don't know if it's so like quote unquote a battle, but the defensive backs for sure are the one where it's like, okay, you lose 3 really good defensive backs. Like what's the next move? 4. Actually, you lose all 4. You lost the entire starting secondary. So it's like, what do you do now? So everywhere in the secondary, I'm like, who's going to start there? Who's going to start there?
And that is why mine is the secondary. It's absolutely the secondary with all of the pieces it's missing. I'm 100% with you. It's Zamaya Vaughn. And then, I think I have ideas of who will be in the other spots. But honestly, I don't know. Because, look, Smith Snowden showed a lot of promise in the bowl game last year. He's a guy that we heard Coach Witt raving about throughout the season, how they wanted to find him more opportunities. I think he'll be one of the starters. But you also have Johnson coming in from Georgia Tech. You also have a guy in Calhoun coming over from Michigan who was buried behind a national championship winning defensive backfield. And that's not out even getting into like a CJ Blocker, who he didn't get his opportunity last year. And we still don't know exactly where Teo Johnson's going to factor in. And speaking of Teo Johnson, since he might play some of cornerback and defensive back, I loved what I saw from Jonathan Hall and Nate Ritchie. But Gilman from Stanford didn't come to Utah to ride the bench. And I know that's a guy that you're familiar with his game as well too, Kevin. There's one starting spot in the secondary that's locked down, and everywhere else, these guys are going to be taking every rep they can get, whether it's in the spring or fall, to decide who are going to be the first corners on the field and who are going to be the corners on the field and secondary pieces just for the majority of the game.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where it's like you look around and it's never ideal to lose the entire secondary. It's just not like to lose everybody at once is brutal. I honestly think, especially after reading these combine kind of tidbits and talking to people who were there, as Sione Vaki could have come back is what I've kind of gathered. And so that kind of is unfortunate because he would have been for sure, like, I think in the Cole Bishop role, kind of leader on defense or whatever, maybe had he returned. But I look around the secondary, like you said, I don't think Gilman, I don't think he comes over to ride the pine. He was all Pac-12 honorable mention. I would pencil him as a starter, realistically. Yeah. And then I also look at Keenan Johnson from Georgia Tech as like the other guy where those are the two where I'm like, I think they will start. Like those are the ones I'm confident in. And then Calhoun, like you mentioned, he didn't play a lot. And so I think that gives a guy like Snowden a chance and those two to go at it. Like go head to head, see what happens. Because at worst, you have a guy who got some playing experience last year for Utah, and he's just going to iron sharpens iron. If he's not good enough yet, then you have a guy who's on a championship team and went up against really good wide receivers like Rowan Wilson and stuff like that. So I feel like they're in a good position per se. I'm glad they brought in a lot of talent, though.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I love the predictions you made. I'll go in. Yeah, so right now I'll go with Gilman, and I'll say Nate Ritchie at the moment, but Jonathan Hall is going to play a ton too. I think the three of those guys all rotate in a decent amount. Looking at other places, Amaya Vaughn for sure. I think you're right about Johnson, and I'm going to give the slight edge to Smith Snowden over Calhoun right now. And I think there's a number of battles that I can't wait to watch play out in the defensive backfield. And as for the next place to go, look, there's some other interesting spots where it's like one or two pieces. To me, the offensive line, I've said it several times on this show. I believe based on how everyone played last year, that being the three returners, Infano, Mokafisi, and Coley, I don't think any of them have that starting job on lock. Keaton Bills and Satao Laumea had their jobs on lock. I thought those guys were good. And all three of the players I just listed, I expect them to start. But I think all of them will have to earn that right over a Falcon Kalmatule, over Caleb Lomu, who's been waiting in the wings for a year now, to a highly heralded freshman recruit who came in and didn't see the opportunity there too. Another freshman in Garcia, 4-star, could play time right away. Right. Even last year, you have a guy in, I can't believe I just blanked on his name. It was supposed to be Utah's center, Johnny Maea, who we thought was going to be the starting center. And then Coley took his spot too. Like there are so many fun battles up for grabs on the offensive line. I can't wait to see how these big guys get after it.
Yeah, I think in Utah, it's all about physicality. I think whoever can help them establish the run the best is, like, this isn't a hot take. Whoever can help them establish the run is going to win the job. Protect the quarterback as well. I think that was an issue. It wasn't like a huge issue last season in the sense of like, oh my gosh, like we can't protect the quarterback, but it was a concerning issue, I would say at times, whereas like it didn't feel like there was a lot of time back there. Now also, I think that could be attributed to Bryson Barnes and Nate Johnson not really being at the level of Cam Rising. I think it goes hand in hand. I think Cam Rising just had an awareness to him. But yeah, I think the offense line is a really interesting one. And then one that stands out to me too, another position battle, is the running backs, simply because
I like it.
I think they have 3 starting caliber running backs, and I don't really think it matters who starts, like for the season in totality. But I think it matters to them. Like I think it matters. Like everyone wants to be the RB1, and I think it'll be really interesting to see like Michael Bernard, does he come back and start? Jalen Glover or Anthony Woods, who comes in from Idaho, like he was an FCS All-American type guy. What does that combination look like? Because I think losing Jaquindon Jackson was a blow because he was kind of like a fan favorite. But I don't think the running back room is any worse, if that makes sense.
I'd go slightly without Jackson, but for the room in totality, like if they were an A with Jackson, to me they're an A- now. Like it hurts, and I want to see Woods do at this level, but I think he's going to be really good, and I think Mekhi Bernard will be back and healthy. Jalen Glover will have improved another year, so I think that they are going to be right there as well. I expect Mekhi to be the starter for most of the games.
Yeah,
I think Woods will have more carries than him. But I do think Mekhi will play a lot, especially as that third down back. So I'm very curious to see how that plays out. We already mentioned the offensive line. If we're doing the offensive line after spring ball, as of right now, I think it will go Spencer Fano at left tackle over there. Left guard is still to be had. I'm going to go with Caleb Lomu. I think right now, way too early, I'm going to go Caleb Lomu, surprising us, taking that job. At center, I'll give Coley the slight edge over Maea, although I think it's going to be one heck of a battle. I think Mokafisi still hangs on at right guard and right tackle. I think for now we'll see it as Tongai, but we could very well see Garcia jump in that spot too as well. And look, we know the defensive line, linebackers, a lot of the other positions are pretty much settled, but I'll also say I thought Samote Pepa or a Licky Vaimahi, I could circle them as absolute starters. And then Keanu Tanuvasa came out of nowhere. So is one of the defensive ends going to surprise us and start over a Connor O'Toole or Van Fillinger? That's something else I'm very interested to see. So many fun battles to watch play out come spring ball. Can't wait to see how they all get sorted out and settled. And honestly, because it's Kyle Whittingham, we won't get the actual answers until fall camp, but it's still going to be fun to talk about and see the little signs and hints we get to witness with them. We still got to wait a little bit for spring ball, but you know what's here, Kevin, is the Pac-12 women's basketball tournament. Utah is going to be in action tonight, and we got to dive into their matchups as well as how the bracket factors in for them. We're going to be diving into all of that in one moment, but first, want to talk to you all about a special sponsor of Locked On Utes. It's our friends at Amazon and Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire Stick TV that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV also really recently created a Fire TV channel that delivers a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That include all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all the game analysis highlights and more. Keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos, all of it available. So you can check out Fire TV on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this one. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV and capitalize the LOFNT in www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Kevin, the Pac-12 women's basketball regular season has come to a close. The final time the Pac-12 women's basketball regular season has come to a close too. Crazy that Utah will be going over to the Big 12 next year and doing that. But as it pertains to the Pac-12, and it's been so much fun to watch Utah's resurgence over the last 2 years in the Pac-12. Last year, they got upset early by Washington State. 2 years ago is when they made a run, and I think they reached the championship game to see Oregon, I want to say, and then they lost in the championship game. So I would love to see them win it this year. As for their first round matchup, they're the 6th seed, so they take on Arizona State. I expect Utah to beat the Sun Devils. We can talk about that a little bit more in a second. But after that, then Utah takes on UCLA. That's a really interesting matchup to me because Utah, of course, has already beaten UCLA once this year. They beat them 94-81, but then they lost at the Bruins 82-52. So they kind of figured some things out in the second game. How's it going to shake out there? After that, you have to see USC probably, and then more than likely Stanford or Oregon State up top. I would expect it to be the Cardinal, but the Pac-12 women's basketball has been the SEC of college football. So this is going to be a gauntlet, a grind. And, you know, if you get hot, we see tournament heroes all the time and teams that get going. Alyssa Peely and some of these Utah Utes can absolutely do that. It's going to be one heck of a final Pac-12 tournament run for Utah.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things too, where this is like a good warm up for the teams that are going to make the NCAA tournament.
Yep.
It's kind of like a good experience for one to, if you don't win it, it's a good experience to realize how quickly your season can end. Because obviously it's one and done in this tournament. You lose, you go back home until the NCAA tournament if you're fortunate enough to make it. And so for Utah, I'm looking at that UCLA matchup. You don't want to look ahead. You don't want to overlook Arizona State, but that's a winnable game. The UCLA matchup is one where it's like, that is a test. That is kind of like, depending on how they do in that game, I think will kind of gauge, or at least for me, how they do in the NCAA tournament. Because UCLA has Lauren Betts. They're a really good team. Obviously, you mentioned the 30-point loss last time. Shooting 29% from three or whatever it was, or 29% from the field, ain't going to do it. Like, you have to figure out ways to score when you're struggling. And I think this tournament as a whole is just a really gritty test of like how good you could be in such a quick turnaround, because you play Arizona State on March 6th, you win, you're playing the next day, and then you're playing the next day again. So like, it is fast paced. There is no time to kind of like, okay, let's relax now. Like, your foot is on the gas pedal. Can they keep their foot on the gas pedal, and can they find solutions to all their problems?
I definitely think they can. I'm not going to predict them to win this. I think there's a reason that they're really good. And I mean, how many other conferences could they win, right? Like, that's what's crazy about this, even without Gianna Neepkins. But I do look at the way that USC, UCLA, and of course Stanford are all playing, and I do have to give them the slight edge over Utah. But I absolutely think this team has the pieces in place, and I think you make a great point, Kevin, about that Utah. Look, you want to have success in the tournament, but guess what? you're going to March Madness either way. Now, the one thing I will also mention is you want to host in the first round. And if you can be a top 4 seed, that's where it's big. So that's where getting a win in round 1, and especially if you could get a win in round 2, I think that would almost lock up that you host. Even if they lose to UCLA, as long as they look good, I expect them to still keep that. But got to take care of business against the Sun Devils. I expect them to do so. It's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. And, we got a lot going on right now at the University of Utah. Spring ball around the corner. The women's basketball team entering Pac-12 tournament play. March Madness for them. The men's team still on the bubble. They're trying to make March Madness too. Kevin, so much to keep track of. Where should everyone head over to if they want to get everything straight?
Yeah, go follow us over at Fan Nations All Utes. We're covering everything in between. We're covering baseball. My writer, Elijah Grayson Murray, is a very big baseball enthusiast. So he's covering the Utes every step of the way. We're going to be covering recruiting because there's some recruiting still happening. Rumors, conference realignment as well as happening again, or conference realignment talks. So we got you covered over here at All Utes. So make sure to check us out.
Kevin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes, but we'll be back tomorrow talking some Utah football recruiting. So we look forward to seeing you all then.
You are locked